Hey everybody, it's Raph here, and thank you so much for tuning in into this very special episode where I was the guest on the Ride With Me podcast, hosted by Mafuz Chowdhury. So in the past, a lot of you have asked to learn more about the Canvas series. In this episode, we go into where the idea first originated from, how it's evolved since, and what's in store next. We also unpack my thoughts, beliefs, and systems, which I often don't get the chance to share on the show, so I was absolutely thrilled to have this opportunity. Please let me know what you think, send me a message on DM, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve and deliver actionable and insightful content for you. Lastly, please show some love for Mafuz and the Ride With Me community. You can find them on Instagram at MafuzC, and you can find the Ride With Me podcast on all of your favorite platforms, including iTunes and Spotify. I'll also include all of the links in the show notes below. So please enjoy this episode, let me know what you think, and I cannot wait to hear from you.
So this is going to be a very exciting conversation because I don't get the opportunity to sit down with podcast hosts a lot. So I'm like, we're in the world of really understanding what it takes in order to do a setup, share a lot of ideas. You sit down with a lot of interesting guests, a lot of them that I know, like Hamza Khan is a good friend of mine, Sam Dema is another great friend of mine, and based on the conversations that you had with them, I could tell that you're part of the community. Like I could tell that you've been part of that circle that is having the same type of conversations about doing better for the world.
Right.
I loved the episodes. I listened from episode 1 to 14 and I consumed a lot of information. We had a really fun call. And this is what I think led to this conversation today. We got on the phone together and we just did a bit of back and forth. And what was really fun for me was sitting there in the whole time thinking to myself, why didn't I hit the record button? Because there was just so much good stuff.
I always get that same feeling too, right?
Right? Yeah. So what is an example of situations that you've had in the past where you got together with conversations and you knew that you had to get this person on the podcast? What is that thing that runs through your mind that gets the ball rolling for you?
To be honest, and that's really what gave birth to the podcast. I found myself having a lot of these amazing conversations with people, with like-minded folks who are trying to improve themselves, trying to create value. They're very deliberate and intentional about how they do it. And every single time, you leave the restaurant, you leave the coffee shop or whatever, you're kind of like, oh, I wish I caught that. Right? And so many times, that's happened a ton. When you and I first talked on the phone, that's a great example. The first time I met Hamza, same idea. We kind of just hit it off, and I was like, oh man, I wish we did this.
Yes.
And obviously, when we actually record the episode, we try to not replicate that same experience. I trust that the person I'm talking to, we can do it again, and we'll hit, new grounds, and that's what's the most exciting part about podcasting, right?
And you can really tell that they believe in it when they're able to talk about it at ease, right?
Yes,
Not
exactly.
that they saved this one bold message for that phone call and now it's out of their system.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like when you take exams in college. You study your butt off leading on the day of the exam, and then once exam's over, you kind of dump it out of your head and you don't think about that, which is really cool. Tell me a little bit about Canvas series. I understand the type of questions that you ask the guest, which always gets me intrigued. Mm-hmm. What is the reason and the inspiration behind why you called it Canvas series, and what was your objective with the podcast?
Yeah, so I called it the Canvas series really to address a gap that I noticed. I'm a large, I consume a lot of content, whether it's blogs, small content on social media, podcasts, videos, vlogs, so on. And especially in the podcast space, a lot of the folks, the thought leaders in that category, they talk about their life in very broad macro strokes. And I love that. I learned so much from Tim Ferriss, Ray Dalio, those titans in their own industries.
Who's your main go-to guy there?
So for the longest time, it was definitely Tom Bilyeu.
Yes, big one.
And what he was doing in Inside Quest and then now Impact Theory. And one thing I realized was that great content, but a lot of these people, when they talk about their story, their 15, 20, 30-year career is in such broad strokes. And they're missing the little, the everyday aspect of it, the early days. What's it feel like when you're uncertain, when you don't know what was going to come up with it, when you're stressed, when it's hard work and you're making trade-offs, and they're not capturing that. They talk about it, but they're not capturing it. So for me, it was really capturing that early momentum, that early sweet spot. And the Canvas series, the name was really around how can we capture those early moments and think about how are people being intentional? What systems are they applying to design their life, to work towards the things they care about? And it's not always in the context of business. It could be relationships, it could be health, it could be your life as a whole.
Yeah.
So the Canvas series is really all about systems and how people are intentionally designing their life to create value for themselves and the people they serve. And I call it the Canvas series because I think of it as a metaphor to life, right? I see our life like a blank canvas, and my goal isn't to tell people how to live their life. I don't want to tell people how to design their life. I don't want to tell people how to approach it. What I want to do is give them tools. I want to give someone all the colors and all the paintbrushes possible. I want to build the biggest toolbox possible so people can design their life to their needs based on whatever matters most to them. And the Canvas series is all about tools and systems and how to enable people to do what they want to do most.
So good. And what did the start feel like? To me, I find that when people are starting, and I mean, I hear a lot about podcasts now because it's like the hot thing to start, but even when people are starting like their business or they're starting to share the story and putting it into a way that gives you a message, you either find one or the two, right? You'll find people that are terrified of the start because there's failure in mind, there is, can I even do this? There's self-doubt, which happens to a lot of people. And then there's the other side, which is confidence and full assurance that you can get this done no matter what happens. Where were you on that spectrum when you started the podcast?
I'd say a mix of both.
Okay.
I'd say in terms of my own capabilities, I'm very confident in that. So knowing that, despite not having a media background or like audio engineering and podcasting, I know that I have the capabilities to always turn out high quality deliverables. And that was rooted in my career. Like I get paid to create high quality deliverables.
Yes.
That confidence was there. But definitely terrified. Definitely terrified.
There's a lot of learning that takes place, right?
A lot of learning.
Yeah.
The vulnerability that takes place. Up until now, I've never really been active on social media, like on my personal accounts. I don't really.
You
share
could have
a
fooled
lot,
me. Right? Since we've connected, I see you everywhere. Either people are talking about you or something cool coming out on your side. So awesome stuff.
Yeah, I was definitely, scared and terrified. And, growing up, I wasn't big on presentations. I, didn't like partaking in speeches and, storytelling. I had a really bad stutter, so that obviously, prevented me from wanting to do this more. So doing this project was really stepping out of my comfort zone, right? Like this is putting my voice out there in the world. It's never going anywhere now.
Yeah.
It's gonna stay there forever, right? So.
Right. And how did the very beginning feel like when you started putting episodes out there? My experience was a bit along the lines of, what you almost expect, where you're not getting a lot of traction in the beginning, you're not getting many listeners, not a lot of subscribers, no one's really talking about it, and you feel like you're speaking into an empty room.
Right.
Almost like walking up to an auditorium where no one's in the seats, and you're just singing your heart out, not knowing how other people feel about it, and whether you should keep doing it every day with the hopes that someone will walk into that auditorium. How did you feel when you started putting out your initial episodes?
I think I took a lean startup kind of approach to it. So I had about 10, 15 friends who I knew that this type of content they would enjoy. So they were kind of like my early adopters.
Yes.
So I framed up my first 4 or 5 episodes specifically for these people. I sent it to them. I constantly got feedback. I followed up. It was a really lean startup approach. I didn't start off not trying to get subscribers or a following or anything.
Yeah.
It was I just want to identify and shape out who is the early adopter, what is the value problem I'm trying to find, and like in tech language, like that product market fit.
Yes.
If the product is the podcast and the market is the listeners, how do I find that fit?
Right.
And I'm still finding that, right? Like I don't think I've nailed it yet. I think if you listen through the Canvas series in the beginning, I wasn't quite sure of what it was, and only recently I really narrowed in on systems.
I definitely noticed that.
You noticed
yeah,
that, right?
Yeah. Like I remember when I listened to your intro episode before episode 1. I thought it was very interesting with how much your style has evolved.
Yeah.
Like you started in a bit more of a factual way of like, these are the things I'm digging into, but I can tell over time you figured out how to ask the right type of questions to start the conversation that people want to start, right? Sometimes it's a situation where they're not open right away. They just met you. Like we just met today for the first time, but we spoke on the phone.
Yeah.
And to me, it was impressive with how quickly we started getting comfortable around each other, where I'll tell you, like, a lot of people come into this boardroom, and that's not always the case. It takes a while to break them out of their shell, and that gets challenging. What is that thought process that goes through your mind? Let's even take podcasts out of the equation. You're going to events. You're going to meet individuals that you've never met. You just walked into Starbucks earlier today. Maybe someone was there and you were interested in getting to know them better. What goes through your mind in terms of the relationship and bonding that happens over that conversation?
Yeah, I think if I just meet someone out of the blue, I'm just curious. I just want to learn more about them, and I'll try to gauge the situation. Obviously, some people don't want to open up too much, and I try. So then in those scenarios, I share about myself. Like, I'm pretty comfortable going pretty deep pretty quickly.
Yes.
And I don't, when someone always asks me like, hey Raph, tell me a little bit about yourself. I try to stay away from like, I work at a high growth startup, and I do this, and I have a podcast. I go into I'm all for adventure and exploring life and doing this, and like I get into it, right?
What's been your recent adventure?
So a recent traveling adventure.
Yeah.
So I did Thailand last November, December, and then my girlfriend Joe and I went to Peru in May, June. So we did the Machu Picchu hike. We went to the Amazon. So that was like a real travel adventure.
That's awesome.
But
did you have fun in Peru? Just want to make sure you had a good time. What would you do? Tell me about an excursion or something crazy that you did.
I think our best was the jungle experience where we saw 3 jaguars just one morning.
And the anaconda.
Yeah,
was this like, tell me there was like a giant cage between the two of you?
No, we were on a boat and they were on the bank. So realistically, they could have like pounced.
Oh my gosh.
Probably,
yeah. That's intense.
And the anaconda was right by our feet, like right now.
Yeah.
It was just lying there, and like it just ate, so you see like the outline of the animal it ate. So it wasn't gonna eat.
Yeah. Raph, I'm gonna give you a confession that only my close friends know about me. I have a fear of dogs.
Okay.
In fact, I have a fear of anything with tails. And it's terrifying to even talk about. The last office that we were at, my neighbor had a very large, I want to say a boxer dog. I don't know the dogs that well, but I think boxer. And once in a while, when I would come up on the way to the office door, I would be in complete fear that the boxer would be in the hallway. And I lived in fear every morning coming to the office, wondering if the boxer was going to be there. And, when people try to figure out the why, and, I've dated a girl in the past that had had 2 dogs, and she did everything in her power to try to get me to get over this fear. But I couldn't pinpoint why it happened. As a matter of fact, when I was younger living in Bangladesh, we owned a dog. We owned a dog and 2 parrots. But then, I blacked out in my memories, and then all of a sudden I have fear. So I feel like something happened that maybe traumatized me that I don't know. So, I mean, props to you. Being around jaguars and anacondas, that might have been enough for me to want to leave.
Here's my confession.
Yeah.
I'm not even big on animals either, right? This was her part of the trip.
Right? Do you love animals? Yeah? Okay,
she
cool.
loves animals. I was all for the hiking and the trekking, but no, it was a good trip. It was a good adventure. But I would even say, I don't think adventure as a concept is only limited to traveling.
You're right.
Physical places. I think, as I mentioned earlier, if I were to really label myself with the word, it would be adventure, and it's really on the personal growth as well. And with business and technology and innovation, I think adventure is when you're being deliberate about how you pave new grounds and explore new things and being curious and learning and acquiring new knowledge and skills and experiences. That to me is adventure. I think life's an adventure as a whole.
100%.
So
I'm really happy you brought curious back, because when you said that earlier, I immediately thought of when you're curious, you're automatically diving into new things. Right? You're curious in how when you tie the laces on your skates and you jump on the rink, you're curious in how you maintain your balance and get better at it.
Yeah.
Right? And to you, it was like picking up new things, be it the podcast, be it just the traveling and different things that you're diving into. Coming down to Mississauga today, spending the time in Streetsville, a lot of it just comes down to curiosity, right?
Right, exactly. And I think the more you're self-aware of what is going on, the more you can be more curious, right? And the more you can be deliberate about that, right? Like I remember when you and I were on the phone, you offered to come downtown and come to where we usually record our episodes in our studio. And I was like, you know what? If I have an opportunity to come to your office, why not?
You said that too. You said it on the call,
let's do it. And that's being intentional about it. But we're walking around Streetsville here. Turns out my girlfriend used to go to school around here. It's a cute little town. Like I love that, right? And I put myself out of my normal routine and environment, and I think that's so important.
That's fantastic, man. I love it. When I spend time with my friends, a lot of the things we talk a lot about is just being open to trying something new every
Right.
weekend, right? And it doesn't mean you have to break the bank, which is what everyone fears. Like for us to try something new, we need to go down to the casino and just go wild, or we need to go jump on a plane and go to the Dominican. A lot of it sometimes is just about, let's actually just do an activity that we're not used to doing. Like let's go to karaoke pubs. Let's actually get on stage and sing a song that we were scared to sing.
Yeah.
Right? Something so small like that is just pushes you to that limit. But what really excites me, which I know is at the bottom line of that fear and curiosity, is the excitement of that you have successfully completed something.
Yeah.
You get off the stage, you feel great. You finish a podcast episode, you high-five each other. You come back from a trip and you're excited to share the stories and the pictures and the Instagram.
Right.
It just gets you pumped, right? So what is one of those things that gets you really excited when you think about the things that motivate you and keep you going every day? What's really fun about having the both of you in the room today is you guys love talking about new things that you're doing, like the new condo, the trip, the podcast, the fact that you guys are doing a really fun setup here. What are some things that excite you that you look forward to doing?
Honestly, having a good conversation, right? And as I start to think about why I do what I do and what motivates me, it occurred to me pretty recently too that what really excites me is when I talk to someone like yourself and seeing how excited you are and how you're strategically working towards and building something for yourself. When I hear those stories, when I meet these individuals, that excites me. Like I think that that's why I do the podcast. It's part of it's because I want to learn new things. It's part of like the research process, share content with the world. But it's also to satisfy another selfish need, which is I just love having these conversations.
Yes.
When I talk to someone like yourself and hearing how you're doing it and like what your setup is and what your plans are and what your vision is.
We literally spent 30 minutes talking about our setup and it had nothing to do with any of the conversation. It was just like, tell me how you do your podcast and I'll tell you mine.
Yes,
it was like
those
showing
are all
our
the
cards.
systems, right?
Yeah.
Those are all the systems,
Yes.
and I am
so good.
obsessed with that.
Yeah.
Whenever I get a chance to learn about someone's systems and how they apply those to do something important to them, that is really the core philosophy of the Canvas series and of myself. And that's why this project means so much to me, because it's the purest reflection of myself. It's the most tangible form of what I care about and what I believe in. So
what do you believe in, Raph? If you were a guest on your own podcast show and the Raph on the other side said, if you were to paint your own canvas with your life story, with your beliefs and your values, how would you paint that canvas from your perspective?
Interesting. So at the macro level, in one sentence, I would say it's to be intentional about success, right? It's to be intentional about what you care about. And, I would say in my canvas, it would definitely be multifaceted. I really make an effort to not see things like my personal life and then work and then relationship and then traveling.
Yes.
Like I don't see them as separate, like disparate, different silos.
Lots of overlaps.
I see it as an integrated system, right? Like how I conduct myself at work will, influence my evening with my girlfriend. My evening with my girlfriend will influence, what I do the next day, whatever it may be. And like everything is integrated, and I think that's personally my point of view. For example, running, I think that's a good example. I run because for health reasons, but I also run because it gives me that kick of productivity and flow. So when I get back from my run, I can bang out 2 or 3 more hours of work. That's why I run, and I strategically run at certain times to give myself enough time that evening and night to get another 2 or 3 hours of work.
You don't say.
Everything
that's
is very
really
deliberate, right?
Yeah.
I see how everything comes together. I run because it's a form of meditation for me. I started running recently without music, so I don't even listen to music anymore. Now I go run 20K without music. I'll just take in the outdoors.
Yeah. Have you done any of those intense marathons, the Tough Mudders?
I did Tough Mudder twice.
Okay.
I did the first one when I was in Toronto, and then I did it, I think, 2 or 3 years later.
What was that experience like?
It was harder the second time.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the first time, I think, me and my buddies trained for it, so like I made an effort to really get in shape for that. The second time, I'm like, oh, I can do it.
I seriously thought it would have been the opposite, with you saying like, I now know what to expect the second time.
Oh no, I think I got overconfident.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
That's right.
And like both my legs cramped. In the water, so like both legs cramped. And I'm doing like a doggy paddle thing. I'm trying to get through, and then my buddies are like, "Hey, do you want to stop?" And I was like, "No." And that's something about me, like when I want to get to a finish line, like I'm gonna do it.
Right.
It might take a little longer.
Yeah.
It might be a lot of pain, but like I'm not stopping.
I've always believed that human beings are so underrated, where we could go through any type of pain if we know there's an end to that pain.
Right.
Right? If there is some kind of things that going through our life, whether we're getting stressed or we're getting burnt along the way, there is an end to it. As long as that's in the back of your mind, as you knew with the Tough Mudder that was going to come to an end, it made a difference and it kept you going. And that's the ultimate motivation that makes people realize that they could actually do so much more when they have that finish line in mind. To me, the toughest one that I did, and I absolutely hate running. I love working out, but I hate running. Like, I literally came back from the gym, which is why I went to the gym strategically before our interview because we're right next door.
Yeah.
So I made sure I worked out for the exact same reasons. It gets my blood flowing. I make sure that everything's in synergy. Like, if I didn't work out today, I would probably have the kinks from Friday night still inside of my system, and I'm still trying to fight it out of my system. But the toughest thing that I did was doing the CN Tower step climb.
Okay.
And this was to raise money for WWF. And I remember signing up, not because I felt like I wanted to achieve fitness. It was simply because me and my friends, that when I was at Sheridan College, decided to rep with Sheridan College shirts and do this climb together as a fun activity. And as a result of knowing that it was just a fun activity, which, by the way, it was not fun, right? But because of that, I didn't actually train for it. I was simply like, cool, let me know when, and I'll keep that day open. And then the day of the climb, I remember, I couldn't give you the numbers for the CN Tower, although I should know this, but I remember getting up about 10 minutes in. The climb surprisingly took me 21 minutes, which I thought it would take me significantly longer. But 10 minutes in, my legs gave up. And there were people that were walking slowly in front of you, so you couldn't actually pass them. So you need to slow down at their level as opposed to surpassing them. And I came to a point where I was using my arms to hold the bar on the side and pull myself out. Now it's an arm workout. It's not a leg thing anymore. But the best feeling, Raph, was when I got to the top floor and you hear the applause. Like, you're still 2 flights underneath the finish line and you hear the applause of everyone cheering and you know you can get there. But just knowing that there was that one station at the very end, it's such a motivator. I think it's very underrated, and you must get that all the time with a lot of the things that you do.
For sure. I can't remember which VC investor. He used to work at Google, and he always talks about how, when he's going through a hard time, he always asks himself, he reminds himself that no matter what, that night he's gonna sleep in his bed. Right?
Okay.
And it's the same thing with the Tough Mudder. Same thing with anything really. It's like you remind yourself, like, in a couple hours it's gonna be over. You might as well embrace it, right?
Right.
And I think a good recent example was when Joe and I were in Peru. We did the Machu Picchu hike, I suppose call it.
Got it.
And we took the Salcantay route, and along that route on the second day, this was the hardest day. This was the day where everybody struggles. It's a hard day. The night before, you're freezing. It's like -15. It's pretty cold, and you're pretty high altitude, and it's just a long, tiring, like, difficult hike.
Right.
And you just kind of have to go through step by step by step by step. It's cold, you can't really breathe, you're exhausted, and like we weren't feeling well because of the altitude and the food we were eating and whatnot. And I remember just going up, and there's so many times where I wanted to stop, and there's so many times where I wanted to catch a breath and chill out, and but I knew if I did that, I may end up A, chilling out for too long, or B, it's just harder to get back in your momentum. So I just remember in my head mentally just going like, it's one step, it's one step, it's one step. And if you add up all these little steps, you eventually get to the top.
Right.
And that's what really helped me get out there, right? It was just step by step, and people along the way would stop, and they were really, and it was hard for sure. It was definitely physically demanding. But for me, it's just one step at a time, just one step at a time. Just keep going, keep going, keep going, knowing that at the end of the night, I'm gonna take I'm gonna lie down somewhere and go to bed, right? So
do you feel like everyone needs to somehow include some type of fitness in their life, not even for the purpose of getting in better shape, but just like mental peace?
For me, it's definitely a mental workout, right? Like when I travel and I do these kinds of treks, obviously part of it is for the experience and learning a new country and experiencing the country, but a lot of it as well, it's a mindset exercise. It's an opportunity for me to train my mind without being in a work environment and things like that, right? Just reminding myself it's one step at a time, and you have to focus on that to get to the end goal. That rewires your brain, so then when you do other things, you remind yourself like it's one thing at a time, one thing at a time, one day, like another hour, and then eventually you get to that outcome, right? And it's so worth it.
And it teaches you so many transferable skills, right? right? Like
Exactly.
once you have a grasp of a consistent fitness routine, like think about all the things that you've mastered that you can bring into any part of your life. Number one, the discipline of staying with it. Number two, consistency, making sure you're doing it over and
Right.
over again on a set schedule. Number three, actually doing it right and becoming aggressively curious, where you're doing research and learning about different fitness routines that works, different nutrition, and then applying it to your life. Tell me anything that you want to do, and I promise those factors matter, right? Like
Exactly.
you need to have the discipline, you need to do it consistently for a long period of time, you need to actively learn to do it better and adjust as you need to. Those are really powerful things to me. One of the things that I find very intriguing is how much the outside world impacts your inner mind, right?
Yeah.
For you, like we talked about fitness mattering up significantly. You obsess a lot over understanding the systems and the way people think. I obsessed over how people adjust their surroundings to better their system and better their inner self. Aside from fitness, tell me a little bit about the people you hang around with. You have an awesome girlfriend that brings a lot of positivity in your life. I think that's great. What else do you have around your circle that just puts you at ease and makes sure that you're living in a positive light?
That's a good question. I would say for my circles and my surrounding, to be honest, I only like nowadays I make an conscious effort to spend time with people that I actually want to, right? And it sounds really obvious, intuitive.
Yeah.
We all want to spend time with people
It's,
we want
it's
to,
rare.
but it's rare. It's
I know
very
so many
rare.
people that I'm like, I don't know why you hang out with that person, and they're like, you don't know about him. He used to be with me when we grew up. Like we go way back.
Yeah.
It's like as if the time length of how long you knew
Matters,
each
and it
other
does.
was the reason why they stayed together. It boggles my mind.
Yeah, and if you ask them, like a lot of times people don't really want to spend time with so and so if you really kind of get into it, but they feel obligated. It's their friends. They went to university. They were roommates or whatever. And I'm still very good friends. Like we're like family with the people I went to school with. But I think it also depends on different situations and what is going on for me, right? If it's the end of a long week and I'm just low on energy and I'm introverted, by nature. So I may not want to spend time with someone who wants to be more outgoing and in an active environment. I might want to pick a friend who I know also values a one-on-one dinner and a deep conversation. And then there's moments where, I want to go camping, or I want to go do this, I want to go do that. There's different people that I can think of that fits those kinds of situations.
Very cool.
And
So
again,
different people for the type of activities or alignment with what you're doing or what you're thinking at that time.
Exactly. So it really depends. And again, it comes back to being intentional, being deliberate, and really being aware of yourself and what works for you, right? There's just certain people that don't fit in certain situations, and that's okay. And being okay with that, I think that's really important.
Yeah, self-acceptance is a big part. I like that you brought up the introvert part of the conversation. It's something I talk a lot about, being an introvert myself. And it's really interesting for me to sit down with different introverts and just learn about what goes through their mind and how different it is from another introvert I would speak to. I think there's so many different ways to approach this and different challenges that are being experienced. As an introvert, how do you deal with, like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you find yourself dealing with day to day? And what are some of the things that you have surprised yourself with your ability to do it, especially being in like a active community, being in the podcast world, having a lot of conversations? How do you cope around all that?
Yeah, so for the first question, what's challenging, I think networking events after work, after a stressful day or a week is challenging for me. It really is. And I really have to ask myself, why am I going? And because often I try to rationalize myself out of those situations, but I know I need to go. I think a good example was last night. It was a good friend of mine, his going away party. I've had a really long week. The last couple of weeks have been long. I'm catching myself burning out, right? Like I only ran once this week. I'm not meditating as much. I'm burning out again. I'm very aware of that situation. On Thursday, I didn't even really work in the evening, which is rare. That's like the first time in forever, right? Like that never happens. So I know I'm entering that state. So last night, I really, I rationalized myself. I was like I really didn't want to go. But then I had to remind myself, I'm going because of this person who is important to me in my life, and I want to send them off and whatnot. So those are the challenging moments when
sometimes a lot of those decisions are being unselfish, right? Like you're doing it more for the other person, even though
it really is,
right? Like it's
point.
tough.
Yeah.
As much as I push people to be saying like, be selfish with the people you want to hang out with and the things you want to do. And I've been in many positions where I'm very open about it now. Before I used to try to be polite and be like, yeah, I don't feel like hanging out, I'm tired. And now I say, listen, this is just who I am, and I feel like staying in today. I hope you're okay with that. And that's the end of the conversation. But you're right. There's many areas where you need to kind of do the things that you don't want to do in order to continue maintaining relationships with the people that you know. My best friend that I grew up with, Mike, moved out to Stony Creek, which is, for those listening, it's about 45 minutes, 40 to 45 to 50-minute drive, and it made things difficult for us to see each other. He's also married, and he works on opposite schedules from my work schedule. Mm-hmm. And I know that sometimes it's inconvenient for us to work around the schedules to meet, and sometimes it's tough to make those drives, especially when the season comes around with snow everywhere. But we do it. And I know that we're both in that same boat where sometimes we feel like we shouldn't be doing it and we could call it off easy. Like one of us is waiting for someone to pull the plug so we can both say yeah. That was literally me with going to the gym today. My guy's on my case, and I was just praying that I got that text message with him canceling, but it didn't happen. And then he told me at the gym that he wished I canceled it, which really ticked me off. But you know that you're waiting for each other to cancel it, but you do it because that's what maintains the relationship. Yeah. If you didn't have that meeting, you may not see each other for months, and that may just put a dent in the relationship that could have been savored by doing 1 or 2 meetings. Yeah. So it's absolutely crucial to just do your part for maintaining consistency. And a common misconception with introverts is a lot of people think introverts just don't like being social, which is complete BS, right?
Yeah, that's wrong.
We love socializing. I'm so excited for this conversation. I got to tell you, I was more excited than nervous, completely. Like, since our phone call, there hasn't been an ounce of nervousness with wanting to meet up with you. I've been excited this entire week waiting for today. And that happened as a result of us enjoying socializing and having a lot in common to talk about. What are your thoughts about just different things that you hear about misconceptions of introverts and how you've been actually proving them wrong over and over with the things that you've been doing?
For sure. I think, so to your point, there's this idea that introverts don't like to meet other people and, be in, social settings. I totally disagree with that. I think it's not about not liking it. It's about do we have the energy to do it, right? And then are we just exhausted because it's tiring, right? Like to be at networking events and stuff. And like I go to networking events all the time, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of how I built my career. I used to be very active, even more so than now in the startup tech space in Toronto. And so I don't think it necessarily means I can't go to networking events. It's just it's tiring, and being aware, like if I have a big networking event that next evening, I probably want to chill out. Like tonight, very cool. I think with last night and even doing this podcast, like. And to your point, how have I, dispelled that idea that introverts don't like sharing and talking? We have a podcast. You know what I mean? Like, think about that for a second.
That's right. This is episode 94. There's 93 other episodes we've done. Like, this has been going on for a while. Yeah.
Like, that's the most counterintuitive thing to do 100%. As an introvert.
Yeah.
The most counterintuitive thing to do.
And then like public speaking is next door, right? Yeah. A lot of people is like, you don't like speaking to people, but you like getting on the stage and speaking to the people and then meeting them after, which is very ironic. Yeah. Do you do a lot of public speaking? No, I don't know if we've gone into that. And why is that?
I just haven't really done it, to be honest with you. I mean, I've done it more in the context of going back to my university and talking about how to get into and thrive in a career in management consulting. Sure. I've done stuff like that. Yeah. But not like a keynote speech.
Sure.
It's probably something I'll be doing soon. I'll be doing a panel soon with the Toronto meetup called Impact Toronto.
Okay, yeah,
I know. So I'll be doing that, so that'll be exciting.
Very cool. But, you'd be really good at it. I got to tell you, just by listening to the things that you talk about in podcasts, but more importantly, your communication style. And that's something I'm very curious about because I study a lot of public speakers to better myself. So whenever I'm sitting there, I sit back and I ask myself, what's their style like if I had to put it into a few words? And more often than not, I'm disappointed because of the commonalities. I see the same thing over and over again. But you have a very interesting style. I think more importantly, because you haven't done a lot of public speaking, you found your own style. You haven't catered yourself into what everyone else is doing, but you'd be really good at it now because you would bring in such an authentic style because you waited this long, because you've honed in on your style. And as you said with the podcast, it evolved over time. So now you'd be bringing that, that evolved Raph onto the stage and sharing a very interesting message. I've done a lot of different forums where I get an opportunity to bring my set of speakers. I get to invite people that I want in these forums as a result of hey, if there's one message that we want to all share, who would be those 5 people? I can think of your name for a lot of those, and I'm definitely gonna give you a call when those things come up.
For sure.
What is your goal with the public speaking? So you have a couple that's lined up. You have a panel that you'll be doing. When you're walking up to that stage or sitting down on that desk for the panel, what is the key takeaway that you hope your audience members will get?
So I mean, one would definitely tie back to the mission and purpose of what I'm trying to do with the Canvas series, which is being intentional about how they create value for themselves and others. I would say though, from my perspective, from a strategy perspective, everything I'm doing right now, whether it's the blogs, the Instagram content, the podcasting, the panels and whatnot, it's all around this first layer of my strategy, which is building a community. How can we get a community? How do we start a dialogue around being intentional and start sharing different systems? We all have different systems, whether we consciously or unconsciously know it. We all have different systems, and how can we share different ideas? Because back to that analogy of the canvas, I don't think there is one right system. There is no slam dunk on how someone should live their life. There's no slam dunk on how someone should pursue success. I think the more we share, the more of a dialogue we can have, the more we can cross-pollinate and configure ourselves differently to share and try new things and experiment. Back to the idea of a venture, trying new things, being curious. The more we can be more intentional about that, right? And I think that is really what I'm trying to build here as a community, and then build products and technology around this ecosystem. But this is my first step right now in my strategy.
Yeah. Well, what's your go-to medium? So when we look at posting on Instagram and sharing messages through visuals and some captions, writing blog articles when you can really go in depth and put things into written word that will last for a long time. Podcast, obviously, something where you get to turn on the microphone and share your thoughts through verbal word, spoken word. And then public speaking, getting in front of a room and actually speaking to them in a way where they're seeing you physically in person. If you had those alternatives, what would be your go-to to do for the long term in terms of serving your community?
To be honest with you, I would say none of those. I would say the most effective medium in my perspective is one-on-one conversations.
Cool.
It's not scalable. I'll admit that, and that's why I do a podcast and I do these kind of things. You think about scale, and I think that's important in the kind of mission I'm trying to pursue. But I think it was Paul Graham who said it out of a Y Combinator. When you first start, you got to do things that don't scale, and I think that's true in so many cases, especially this. It's most effective in my experience to have these one-on-one conversations, to really dig deep into someone, really unpack these systems and strategies. It helps me refine my voice, helps me refine my narrative, but it also helps that person really learn something. And then what are they going to do? They're going to go and apply it, and then they're going to let me know, and then they're going to go tell other people, and that word of mouth, I think, is the most effective.
It builds a community.
Exactly.
Right? It's sharing the same story passed on to many people. This is really interesting because it was a big frustration I had with podcasting when I saw how difficult it was for someone to write a comment or send a message back to me. Right. You put an episode on Spotify, then what? What are they doing to respond to what I'm saying or start a conversation? And I initially felt that way about Instagram as well, where a lot of people are pouring in content. You get the occasional comment that you hit a reply to, and then it kind of just dies out. I loved using the direct message section. It's something that I use probably all my time on Instagram now. I'll put up one picture a day, but all my time goes into direct messages in building relationships with people. And exactly as you said, is you're having that conversation in any way you can. And my goal more often than not is to take them off the phone and get them in person. Right? It's like, let's have a few back and forth. Okay, this is interesting enough. Let's actually try to get together for coffee. And I've been going on many active missions lately to just meet a lot of people. And I think this was inspired by when I first wrote my book and I started going out there to learn about the writing process. Because again, I'm curious, but I don't know anything about the book writing world. I just know I have a story I want to share. But it's like, how do I put things down on paper? How do I get it printed? How do I get it published? How do I get it on an Indigo shelf? And then how do I do an event that will allow me to sell things legally, right? Like, do I have to make a business around it? And I had to do a lot of learning, and I was so welcomed by the community. I'm on part of 3 author Facebook groups, and some of the coolest people I've met on there that I'm excited to continue connecting with. But what was the best thing was it was an instant barter. I came in and they're like, we need help with marketing. and I said, I need help with publishing. Let's just keep talking and help each other out with no expectation of return. We're not looking for monetary value. We're not trying to charge each other. We're just looking to help each other succeed, and it's a win-win situation. So I feel like monetary screws things up sometimes. Like when the dollar amount comes into play, it changes everything.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious, as you go on these missions and you reach out to people in DMs, and that's kind of how you and I kind of started as well.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
I'm curious, because how has that translated to your current following community? Like, would you say the one-on-ones and these pointed, focused discussions, despite not being scalable, would you say that's a large driver to like your current community right now?
Big time. And when I look at the numbers in my community, which I don't do often enough, sometimes I have to remind myself how big the community is. But I got to tell you that it could have been larger if I decided to quickly scale. Right? It could have been significantly larger. I could have probably been, in the 10s, 20, 30,000 easily, but it's around maybe 8,000. But the reason for the gradual growth is there's so many conversations that happens behind the screen that I don't end up sharing it out in the open because I respect their privacy. I feel like the best conversations happen in private moments.
Exactly.
Because they're not doing it for the purpose of trying to reach to an audience, so they're not paraphrasing it in a way that the audience can resonate. They're just giving you the raw. Like, this is how I feel and this is what's happening, with fully understanding that you know the context, so I don't need to give you the backstory. I love that raw conversation, and that's what we had on our phone call that made me want to immediately get together with you. But what was really interesting for me more than anything else is how much people are willing to just connect with you for a longer period of time as opposed to a one-time conversation.
Yes.
When I say I meet 100 people, I don't just meet 100 people once. I'm doing meetings every single day with the same people, be it grabbing coffee with them, having lunch, bringing them to the office, meeting them at their office. You just always excited about the idea of moving that community forward. And this has become a new passion of mine where when I learn about someone, so Raph, when I investigate your Canvas Series podcast,
sure,
I want to know who's following you. I want to know who's writing these comments. I want to know, is it other podcasters? Is it people in the personal development space? Is it business? Is it people that's interested in psychology? And that, to me, that's exciting because that makes me learn a lot about who you are based on who you decided to build that relationship with. So how do you define that audience? Tell me about the Canvas series community and who would you say they are the ideal listeners?
Yeah, so if I were to wrap up the last 5-10 minutes of the conversation, I think my approach that I always keep top of mind, and everyone on my team as well, it's that we'd rather focus on a few people who love what we do and can truly benefit from what we do than a lot of people who just like it. Right, so to your point, you can easily hit 20, 30,000, tons of subscribers and whatnot, but you rather focus and really invest your time to people that isn't a one-time conversation. It's a community. It's an ever-growing community.
It's honestly more fun
time.
too.
Yeah, that takes a lot more time. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more rewarding.
Yeah, but it also takes a lot more energy.
Yes, right. And if it means hanging around the 8,000 for you right now and really investing in that and then growing out, I think that's more important, right? And that's a strategy that I've always kept top of mind, is focus on the few that love you, and a lot of that is the follow-ups, it's the DMs, it's the one-on-one conversations, and really honing down on building that tight tribe, right? And as part of my bigger strategy as well in terms of building a product that enables people with the systems to design their life, I need early adopters, right? And these are my early adopters. This tribe is really strategically formed to be my early beta testers and my early users and whatnot. So that's all of that comes into play. And as I think about who is my target audience, to be completely honest with you, I'm still trying to figure that out. If I have to be completely honest, my hypothesis right now is someone who is trying to create something in their life, whether it's their own personal growth, whether it's a business. I think most likely it will be around business, career, entrepreneurship focused, and are trying to do something new for themselves, is doing something that matters to them. So that they're not trying to build a business for the sake of building a business. They're not trying to get into a career in consulting for the sake of it. They're doing something because they actually really want to do it. It aligns with who they are and what they're trying to become. And then they're looking for the mechanics of how to get there. So they want to do something, they have the why, they have the vision, they just don't know the how. And again, back to my whole analogy of the canvas series, I don't want to tell you how to paint your canvas. And I think these individuals know what they want to what they want to paint on their canvas. My goal is to make sure they have all the tools they need to do it. Here are all the tools. Here's how you gotta do it. Here's how other people have configured it and turned it. You find the one that works for you.
And you take in things from other people if you see some inspiration.
Yeah.
I think because of having that kind of community and that involvement, if I ask the question of like who inspired you to kind of have your personality and do the things you do, it's hard to answer, right? Because there's so many conversations intertwined into one inspiration that ends up doing a lot of things you want to do. Raph, as we're wrapping up, what's next for you? Like, I want to definitely be keeping up with your podcast series, as well as I think a lot of my listeners would be very interested in, because it's very aligned with a lot of the personal development things I talk about. But what else are you doing?
Yeah, so with the podcast, I'm trying to share my story now on other platforms such as Ride With Me podcast. So shout out to the listeners of this show. Getting on panels and meetups and whatnot. And then I also want to launch a weekly show where I kind of have like a 5-10 minute clip where I talk about and unpack one system a week and kind of really break that down. So this all comes into hand about building the phase 1 of the strategy, which is community, and then really start to codify everything I've learned, all the research, all the Instagrams, all the feedback, the comments, the DMs, the podcast, everything I've done in phase 1 of the community is my requirements that I'm gonna break down and digitize into the system and a product.
Yeah.
And I really envision a tool that we all have on our phones that comes stock on every smartphone, where it allows people to design their life, a system that does that, takes into consideration your calendar, your health, your notes, your thoughts, everything.
That's so powerful.
I want to bring it all together, make it about you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make it about what matters to you, and then really start helping shape the systems in your life to help you do that. That's what's next. And I encourage everyone listening to follow along on Instagram. I'm at canvas.series.
I was just going to ask you. I was like, you have to share your handle.
Yeah, I have to.
It's what? It's canvas.series, right?
Yeah. Canvas.series on Instagram and Facebook. You can also visit the website at www.thecanvasseries.com. So a lot of exciting stuff, a lot coming up. I got to do a better job at really, telling the narrative on the website and the platforms. I'm still trying to be better at that. But a lot's coming down the pipeline. Now I'm really focused on the people who I think can truly benefit from this. Really focusing on that few that love, and then growing it at that up.
Raph, we really need to hang out more. I think there's a lot of fun conversations. I don't think this will be the last time we hear from you on the Ride With Me podcast. I think you've shared a lot of interesting stories that I almost want to do a follow-up, like the follow-up Ride With Me with Raph. Where is he at now? One of those shows, just to hear like how are things going, what have you been able to roll out? Are you still at episode 14 right now?
Yeah.
So I want to sit down with you sometime in like well past episode 30 and be like, what has changed, just to learn that side of things. You have so much tremendous value to offer anyone that's listening, let alone myself who's taking a lot of mental notes here. I look forward to having this conversation, and I'm really thankful, and I think the listeners are, for you to spend some time with us on this Ride With Me podcast.
For sure, and thank you so much for having me on the show. Beyond grateful for that.
Fantastic.